Proboscideans. Welcome guys again to the channel, Walking with Dinosaurs. Walking with Dinosaurs, oh my god. Ranking with Dinosaurs. Where today, we're not gonna be ranking any dinosaurs. No. We're gonna be ranking Proboscideans. So this should be more ranking with beasts, I guess. Yeah. Ranking with beasts today. Proboscideans are, elephant relatives, if we know. Well, I mean, elephants are proboscideans, but we're not going to be talking about elephants. We're going to be talking about its ancestors and some non-ancestors as well. They were very varied. Like, people underestimate how weird elephants get in the past, so it's going to get freaky, if you know what I mean. But yeah, these proboscideans, and again, these are not my forte when it comes to knowledge. So I had to do a lot of digging, a lot of research. But as soon as I saw some of these proboscideans, I'm like, I gotta do this tier list. So we're gonna be starting with MOERITHERIUM. So we're gonna be going and starting at the beginning of the Cenozoic in the Eocene of Egypt with MOERITHERIUM. So this guy predates all elephantiforms or dinotheres. It's the least looking elephant-like animal here, Proboscidean. And, it presents no trunk. So, first one already out of the gate, no trunk. So, you shouldn't classify one as a Proboscidean, but it is. I think the best way to describe this guy is a mix between a hippo and a tapir. Since it is speculated that it had the trunk, not the trunk, but the taper-like upper lip, very mobile. But yeah, no trunk. And it still had the tusks of later proboscideans. So you can guess, they were not as big. The upper tusks were like pointed down, so they look more like saber teeth. And the lower ones were like flat-shaped, like flat spade-like. And yeah, I think that's most for MOERITHERIUM. We know that it was most definitely a semi-aquatic creature. It fed on water plants. All of this based on not only before it was thought to be because they look like hippos and tapirs, but some actual isotope analysis and some of the morphology, it actually just shows us that it was actually a semi-aquatic animal. MOERITHERIUM, I'm not too crazy about it, so I'm going to start with a C tier, DEINOTHERIUM. So, I'm going to be starting with the terrible beast here, moving on. This is a 13 feet tall animal and 10-ton heavy animal. It's huge. Now, this guy is a dinothere. Dinotheres are actually different, in a different group than elephantiforms. They split fairly early. They still look very alike. They still look, superficially, they look like elephants. But there's a couple main differences. They have a more flexible neck. Usually elephants, they just look one direction. If they want to look somewhere else, they have to, move their entire bodies. They had more flexible necks. And they had more slender limbs, actually. Still very pillar-like, like other elephants. But yeah, they were more slender compared to their big body size. As I was saying, these guys were huge. But yeah, like one of the main differences, like one of the most characteristic features of DEINOTHERIUM, I think we've all heard of DEINOTHERIUM at least once, are the lower tusks that they curved like down backwards from the mandible, and we didn't know like what the actual functions of these were. I thought it was actually for like stripping bark off of trees. Like that was what I thought before what they were used for. But actually, as they were like high browsers and they could they had very muscular necks. They could actually remove branches with their trunk and use the actual tusks to remove the actual branches from the trees. So that's actually pretty neat. I didn't know that. And they actually lack the upper tusks. They have none of those. Again, they still have the trunk. But yeah, that's it for DEINOTHERIUM. I'm going to put it in I was thinking of putting an S tier, and I'm gonna follow my gut. S tier. Mastodon. So this is a 10 feet, 9-ton animal. Again, pretty huge. Now, this guy had one of the most crazy looking, well, not the most crazy, but some really long tusks, upper tusks. They curved upwards and almost in, but they were really long and really heavy. But yeah, these guys, again, not as tall as DEINOTHERIUM, for example, but they were still really heavy. So they were much more stockier, I want to say, compared like to other Proboscideans. But the head also was a little, like the dome of the head was lower. So it kind of looked like it was hunching a little bit. At least that's how I see it. And it had a longer tail. And as for the diet, because it lived with other megafauna being the large animals, mostly herbivores that lived during its time. Their diet based on low browsing, ate like fruits, leaves, woody parts of plants. It allowed to, not compete with other big ass animals of its environment. These guys were pretty similar to modern elephants in that they were very sociable. They lived in herds. I think mostly females lived in herds, and males just went crazy going around, wreaking havoc. But yeah, these guys again lived with early humans, Paleo-Indians to be more exactly, and yes, they were hunted by them. It's gonna be a what do I call it? A recurring theme with Proboscideans. Mastodon, I think it's a nice B tier. It's nothing crazy, but I like it more than MOERITHERIUM. CUVIERONIUS. Now, this is a gumfootier. It's another group of elephants in the New World. So the Americas in the Pleistocene. Now, these guys were pretty short, but they were comparable in size to Asian elephants, I want to say. Yeah, Asian elephants. Again, a little shorter than them, but they were much more bulky. These guys, again, were hunted by humans, as with mastodons. And these guys actually lived like as recently as 12,000 years ago, so that's really close. But yeah, these guys had a longer skull than other Proboscideans, and their tusks, upper tusks, were like really long, mostly straight but slightly curved. And they had this thing, which is weird. I don't know what kind of adaptation this needs, what the actual needs for this adaptation to come out, but their enamel was spiral shaped. So what I mean is, you had the tusks, and they were curved like this. So that's pretty neat, but like, why? Like, why do you need that? CUVIERONIUS, why do you need that? It's kind of weird. The actual lower tusks are actually vestigial for late gumfootiers like CUVIERONIUS, and they were only present in like the actual juvenile, so they actually lost it as they were growing up. But yeah, I think that's it for CUVIERONIUS. Pretty usual elephant-like build. I'm gonna put it in. Do I like it more than Mastodon? I kind of do. I'm gonna put an A tier. Here's my tier list. The Columbian mammoth. Now, I'm gonna be moving on to the Columbian mammoth, a massive Proboscidean. You got 14 feet tall, 12 tons, so one of the bigger ones. And this guy's descended from the Eurasian steppe mammoth, like around 1.5 million years ago, and they suffered hybridization with the holy mammoth. Another one of the Proboscideans that we'll be looking at a little later. But yeah, today, like, their close relatives today are actually the Asian elephants, which I don't know, it kind of makes sense since they themselves descended from the steppe mammoth from Eurasia. But yeah, these guys were massive. They had their front limbs were a little bit longer, and their tusks were like long as hell and very curved. If you've seen this is gonna be a deep cut, but if you've seen Primeval, the Columbian mammoth episode, that is scary. I can only imagine a rampaging Columbian mammoth. It'll be so terrifying, actually. But yeah, these guys preferred the more open plains, open landscapes, where they could be, one with nature, eat all the sedges and grasses they could. But yeah, these guys were actually also discovered. A lot of them were discovered in this predator traps and tar pits, and natural traps, where a bunch of them, like one of them could die in one of these tar pits, and a lot of predators would come in to try eat the actual the trapped mammoth, and they themselves would die. This is what are called natural traps. But yeah, Columbian mammoth, I actually really like it. I get a pretty an A tier as well. I kind of want to put an S tier though. It's gonna be an A tier. Platybelodon. Now, this guy's an embellodontid. Obviously, closely related to embellodon. But yeah, Platybelodon is one of the freakier looking proboscideans in this list. It had a elongated, spoon-shaped lower jaw. So its lower jaw was like this, basically, without counting the tusks. So this guy still had the upper incisors, the upper tusks, but they were slender and a little shorter than usual. The other proboscideans, still in males, they were much larger. And it was actually believed that it didn't have any, like, a trunk, more like a hippolyp, because of the weird ass lower jaw. Like, why would it have one? But it actually did have a large trunk, a pretty large trunk for grasping vegetation and branches. But yeah, speaking of the lower jaw, it still had the tusks from the lower tusks, but they were like flat, broad tusks, so they were like an extension of the actual lower jaw. And what paleontologists thought is that it fed on water plants, because what the hell were they doing with that huge ass spoon on its mouth? But no, it actually used it for stripping the bark of branches. Now, this is what I thought DEINOTHERIUM did, but no, it's actually Platybelodon's diet or its job to do this, basically. And removing the bark from trees and cutting off vegetation. It would use its trunk to grab the vegetation, and use its lower one to just scoop it, so it cut all the branches and could actually eat it. But yeah, Platybelodon is actually pretty insane looking. I really like it. I might put an S tier. I'm gonna put it in S tier. PALAEOLOXODON. So, speaking of PALAEOLOXODON, there are so many species on this genus. I might be able to do a tier list of only PALAEOLOXODON species, but for the sake of the video, I'm going to use PALAEOLOXODON as a genus, and it's remarkable. Their origins are in Africa, but then they expanded to Eurasia. It was all over the place. So, this genus actually contains the largest known species of Proboscidean. Over 13 feet tall, over 13 tons, massive. These guys were the biggest. In contention for one of the largest mammals, again, terrestrial mammals. But it also had the smallest species of Proboscidean, of elephant, in PALAEOLOXODON falconeri, which was from the Mediterranean island, a little over 3 feet, I believe. A little over 3 feet, and keep in mind, these were like full adults, so a full adult elephant being over 3 feet. Come on, that's small. This was due to insular dwarfism, which is what some animals experience, some big animals experience when their habitat is very tiny, in this case, an island. But yeah, PALAEOLOXODON, pretty crazy animal. Again, their diets are very varied. As I was saying, there were so many species. Some were grazers, others were mixed feeders, or others were browsers. So, there's a lot of different diets they had. Again, a lot of the species show interactions with early humans. And we can see them in cave paintings and stuff, and actual artifacts that they were made with their bones. But yeah, PALAEOLOXODON, it kind of looks like an overgrown elephant, but the fact that it has so many species and they're all so different is kind of cool. If you want to see the PALAEOLOXODON tier list, let me know. I think it's going to go in A tier. STEGOTETRABELODON. Now, this guy, with his long-ass name, is a primitive elephantid from Africa, the Arabian Peninsula, and Italy. Yes, Italy. I don't know why Italy specifically, but yes. It's found in there. Now, why I say primitive is because one of its most primitive features is that it still had permanent premolar teeth. Now, let me know what that means. But I'm going to assume that the other guys usually rotate them or lost them. But yeah, one of its most interesting and insane-looking features, again, for Stegotetrabelodon, I mean, it's in the name, but I'm going to tell you right now, is that it has some insanely large lower tusks, which are shared with gunfoot eaters. But this guy's being more primitive, still had those, but they were very long, which are the longest lower tusks, reaching around, I think, 7 feet, which is 7 feet for lower tusks, and still having 9 feet upper tusks is insane. I don't know how this guy could close its mouth or even walk without tripping on those. How do you sleep? How do you eat, my friend? You are insane looking. Like, you look like right out of fantasy novel. I don't know. Nature was getting a little bit too creative with Stegotetrabelodon. But yeah, that's what gives it its name. Tetra being 4, meaning 4 tusks. I mean, it's pretty self-explanatory. I'm going to put Stegotetrabelodon in A tier. And I'm going to lower CUVIERONIUS so that A tier doesn't look too crowded. The Holy Mammoth. Now, we're going to be closing this Proboscidean tier list with the most famous one. The most well-known. The Holy Mammoth. Now, the Holy Mammoth is very, very important and very famous because the preservations of these guys until today has been insanely crazy. Like, we got mummies from little babies, and preservation of the actual fossils is impeccable as well. This guy has had insanely large tusks. It is very well recognized because, I mean, it's called the Holy Mammoth for a reason. It had an insane coat of actual hair that helped it live in its environment, which was, again, very cold in the Ice Age. This guy's had a more northern, much more northern habitat, which was, again, very cold. Unlike the Columbian mammoth, which it did live alongside, not alongside, like next to it, but at the same time. But you know, the Columbian mammoth was much more southern. But again, they did. There is evidence that they crossbred, so there was some hybridization over there. Again, it is very famous because early humans did interact with it. They hunted it down. There is signs of that. There is actually cave art of that as well, as you may know, and there is actual structures that were built with them, actual clothes that were built with some of their fur. But yeah, Holy Mammoth, very important animal in human history, basically. They actually suffered as well from insular dwarfism. Not that the particular Holy Mammoth was, but some subspecies were in islands and did experience this insular dwarfism where they got really small. The actual last bastion that we know of like where they were last seen was in Sunpoli Island. But yeah, this guy's insanely important, insanely iconic. Again, maybe in the near future we'll get a comeback of the Holy Mammoth. We don't know. Scientists are looking to revive it. Let me know what you feel about that, actually. We recently had by the time you're seeing this video, it's been some time, but the actual direwolf kind of situation, kind of strange. I don't know how to feel about that. But, you know, if they're going to bring the Holy Mammoth, I guess it's cool. But, you know, it's another can of worms. Holy Mammoth, I mean, it's got to be an S tier, right? So this is the Proboscidean tier list, guys. Let me know what you think in the comments. Which is your favorite Proboscidean? Which Proboscideans did I left out? I know I left out, again, a lot of them. But yeah, these ones are the ones that I had a much more feeling with them. And yeah, I think they were pretty cool. Let me know what you think. Like, please, subscribe as well. It really helps. We're almost there to the 500 subscribers. But yeah, guys, again, thank you so much for watching the videos. Let me know what other kind of videos would you like. I know this wasn't dinosaurs, and you came to the Ranking with Dinosaurs channel to watch dinosaurs being ranked, but no, today I flipped it a little bit again. But yeah, I think this little breaks here of non-dinosaur content I think it helps a lot. It helps me a lot too, to not feel burned out. Thank you guys once again for watching. See you in the next one.